Joe! Joe on Joe is the only podcast where Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepski.
Hello and welcome back to Rebekah on Joe. Thanks so much to our listeners for coming on back. And today I am so excited for our guest of the day. You may know him as Joe from the Joe on Joe podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the studio, Joe Slepski.
Oh my God, thank you so much for having me on, Rebekah. I listen to your show every week, a couple times a week.
That's
actually.
great.
Yeah. And I feel like I know it like the back of my hand. I'm so excited to be here in the studio with you.
Well, welcome.
Oh my God, it's crazy.
Just so you know, I have dressed in honor of you today with a Chicago t-shirt
What?
and Hollywood
Represent?
socks.
Represent.
The socks purchased by your mother. So I wore these
What?
especially for you.
Oh, that's delightful.
Especially for
So you guys can paint a picture. I'm still in my Superman pajamas.
And I and a Green Lantern t-shirt.
Yes,
So
yes.
you are representing the
Yes.
comic book
And it's-
kingdoms.
It is Christmas Eve morning.
It is.
And we are getting ready for a big Christmas week.
You and your wife? Is that who you're discussing?
That would be you.
Right.
That would be you.
That would be me, your wife.
Yes. And our dogs, and we're getting ready, and we're excited. And so, I mean, I couldn't think of a better way to spend Christmas Eve than talking about G.I. Joe with one of my favorite G.I. Joe podcasters, Rebekah Slepski.
That is me. And thank you so much for being our guest today. I wanted to ask you a couple quick questions. I'm reading here on my notes, it says that you are a podcaster.
I am.
Yes. How did you get your start? What is your background in podcasting? How did you get your first influences of podcasting?
The first podcast I ever listened to was a Kevin Smith podcast.
Really?
What would be the Smodcast. Yeah.
And so Kevin Smith, the writer director of Clerks.
Yep.
What is his significance in your world before we get to the podcast part?
Oh, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge fan. I think his work says a lot. There's certainly some flaws, and it's certainly for a certain target demo.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he had such a genuine voice, filmmaking wise, in the '90s, and just very. I love his dialogue. Very smart. Very not how we talk every day, but also how we talk every day. So yeah, big fan. Followed his work throughout it.
And that was an influence of yours during your college years?
Yeah, college and post and everything, and followed him, and big fan. So one day a friend of mine, I believe it was Matt, said, "Hey, Kevin Smith has a podcast," and I was like, "What's a podcast?" And he was like,
So about how long ago was that?
He was like, "Oh, this would have been like 2000." It was. I remember where I was because I remember listening to it on a Zune.
A Zune. Tell this to the fans who are born after the Zune
all
phase.
you Guardians of the Galaxy 2 fans, guess what? Guess what? I had a Zune. I had multiple Zunes, actually. So this was probably around 2006. Because I remember I got it. I listened to it on my Zune in my condo, and I just moved in. So it was like 2006, 2007.
In Chicago,
Yeah,
right?
in Chicago, yeah. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And he's like, oh, they just talk. You just get it on iTunes. I'm like, you don't pay for it? No. And so it was what would either it was a Smodcast or it was what would become a Smodcast.
Got it.
And I mean, it was great. And I was like, this is a thing. And then soon after that, we heard that Adam Carolla was doing podcasting.
Okay.
And then that was also the second biggest one that I listened to, from the start.
And why is Adam Carolla significant to you? Just because it's a podcast, or was it because of him and a history with him?
We always liked him. It's funny you say that because I've recently stopped listening to him for like the last 6 months because he's gone
Controversial.
It is for me because he's gone too far. He's just a little too far from what the 'cause I was a big fan of Loveline in college. I loved Loveline.
Can you describe what Loveline is to folks who aren't from your generation?
Well, Loveline. Well, I believe it might be still on in some form, but it was.
But to people who maybe don't listen to the radio,
it was a syndicate. Okay, so going back pre-podcast stuff, I cut my teeth to borrow a term from Wild Weasel, the Rattler pilot. I cut my teeth in Chicago on WLUP radio, the Loop 97.9 in the 90s, which if you grew up in the Midwest, that was the station for everything, and it was FM talk. And from morning till night, I had a job that I would, like my summer job, would be listening to. I would just be around radio all day.
Your job was to listen to the radio.
It was construction stuff. So so I was in a shop. I was in a construction shop. So I was just literally, there was nothing to do but let's do it. And I worked solo. I ran the shop alone. So it was whatever I wanted to. And specifically, when I was a senior in high school, I got chickenpox.
Oh.
And I had to lay in bed.
That's so weird. I got chickenpox when I was a sophomore in college, which was around the same time as you.
Yeah, it might have been the same.
Weird.
It was Christmas time.
Well, if you were a senior,
Christmas
I was a
time,
freshman, so I
yeah.
got it the summer of my sophomore year. So I got it slightly after you. But that's weird that we as adults had chickenpox.
I avoided my whole family. None of us got it. And then
really?
one Christmas, we were visiting. I was visiting a college for potential recruitment stuff for going to college, and both me and both my sisters. We got it. We think we got it from like a family party or something, and then we gave it to my other sister that same weekend because we were all hanging out.
Congratulations!
Yeah. I know, right? Because we were all hanging out, but I broke out with like weird shit. Well, it's chickenpox, and we thought I was allergic to beer.
Thank God that
because I
wasn't
hadn't
the case.
had a lot of beer at that point in my life, and
So you were illegally
at college
drinking.
parties. Yeah, we were at college parties. Yeah, and they were like, "Ha ha, you're allergic to beer." And then I looked over and saw that my sister had the same thing cropping up on her face like the next day.
Wow.
And I was like, then you are too, dude. And then so on, and then 2 weeks, literally, I think the incubation period is like 14 days, and and day 13, my other sister calls home and goes, "Ha ha, I never got it." Day 14, she called back and goes, "I was really sick today."
So gloating is
gloating
is the lesson, and also it sucks to be the middle child. Let's just keep that going.
But the point of that is, I couldn't then go to school, so I was home alone. And when I was home alone, I was bored out of my gourd. This is like 92, 93, January 93. And I found FM talk radio. AM talk radio.
Oh,
and
AM.
AM at this point. And
Got it.
And it was Kevin Matthews.
Kevin Matthews.
And Johnny Brandmeier on AM talk radio.
Jonathan Brandmeier. I know
He was
that
a big name. He had a big
Chicago.
national presence. Chicago and national. He had a late night talk show briefly during that when everyone was getting a talk show phase, like post Arsenio number one. Yeah, he did. And he came out to LA and he did work California. So while you would have been out here. So you might have seen him on the radio out here.
Okay.
But I found Kevin Matthews
Isn't it Brandmeier in the morning?
Brandmeier in the morning, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was huge. He was the biggest show in Chicago for years while you were there.
Okay.
I love Kevin Matthews. I fell in love with he just did voices, and I was like, this is one guy he did Jimmy Shorts and Devon and a bunch of like just ridiculous voices. Very much.
I don't know any of those voices. Can you tell me who they were?
They were characters of his. His biggest one is Jimmy Shorts. Yeah,
got it.
And Jim Shorts was a sports talk guy.
Oh,
he was the sports guy, but it was just he would drop into this register like, "Hey everybody, this is Jimmy Shorts coming at you with the latest news." Blah, 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 blah. And it was like that kind of talk, but he would do it really fast. California listeners and national too, you guys may know a guy named Phil Hendry, who I never knew at the time, but I've since met him actually and heard him out here. He is brilliant at that work, that going in from voice to voice to voice, talking to himself, carrying on these conversations. So once I learned that that's what Kevin Matthews was doing, I was like, I love this dude. And then they started the FM side of the talk, and the loop went from playing rock and roll music to doing a little bit of rock and roll music, but mostly FM talk. And it wasn't sports talk. It was FM talk about the issues, but like with a stupid fun way. Call a lot of callers, and I fell in love with it.
Great.
Fell in love with it.
And then from there, did they have Love Lines on that channel?
Yeah. So Love Line was that. It was like a late night talk show that would air syndicated, and I heard that in college. And it would, and so we were in Champaign, and it would air like every night on the local radio station at like.
Because you went to U of I.
Yeah, at like 10 o'clock at night, from like 10 to midnight, and it was Dr. Drew, and eventually Corolla was his guest host. Originally, I don't believe it was him. And then Corolla was the most successful host with it, and Corolla went on to Loveline. They had a TV show on MTV with it, and that was their brand.
That's how I was introduced, was from the TV show.
So we were listening to Corolla on Loveline in the mid 90s, just sitting around a radio in Champaign,
and all your pals, you're having beers, and
we
were
were
just
laughing
listening.
our ass off. Yeah, just dying.
I want to ask you. It's a leading question because I already know your experience on talk radio. with Love Lines is specific.
Oh yeah,
Because it was interactive. It was interactive, right?
We called in one night. This is a funny story. We called in one night, and I won't get into because this Joe on Joe is a family friendly podcast, so I won't get into the details.
Well, and as we know, college students get into some shenanigans.
Yeah. So we called in to Loveline, and this was pre-cell phone. It was a big deal, like to call in to California to get through and get on this national show.
Big deal,
because we were big fans. And we were sitting around, we're like, we should call in and we should be on the show. Well, what problem do we have? And I was like, well, I got a problem. I go, I'm dating a girl that's not very reciprocal. That's all I'll say. And so we're like, all right, let's do it. So we call in, and the funny part of the story is that I'm on hold for quite a while, and everyone couldn't be in the room with me because I would have laughed or whatever. So they were all outside listening on their radios. What I didn't know, because I was waiting on the phone, is that the local Champaign radio station lost the feed about a half hour before I actually went on. So the guys were just sitting outside my door listening to through my bedroom door, trying to listen to me talk, right? So I get on, I ask my question. He gives me a very funny answer. And I'm like, I love it. And I'm like, oh, and they were going to record it, of course. And I open the door, and there they are with their ears against the door. Absolutely true, like a cartoon.
Falling in the door when you open it.
And they're like, I'm like, what happened? How did it sound? They go, we don't know. I forget the name of the radio station. They're like, the radio station crapped out, and we have no idea what you said. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, we went through all this, and I got on, and blah, blah,
Did you get good advice?
Well, yes. But... So we were just anecdotally were able to tell that, and no one ever heard it.
Right.
Fast forward to a couple years ago, maybe 4 years ago, in the world of podcasting, Corolla has what they call a super fan. This guy, I think his name's Giovanni, and he chronicles literally everything that Corolla does. It's a little creepy, although if there's any Joe and Joe super fans out there, super fans, let's bring you on board. And they put together an archive of all the old episodes, and I had to use my mental memory of deduction to find the date that I called on there, because I wasn't sure. Like, we didn't take a note or anything. And I was like, all right, it was after this date and it was before that date. And I started, and I couldn't remember any guests, couldn't remember anything about it. I found it on one of their podcasts. So I have it saved as an audio file.
So do you have it saved as an audio file? Would you be willing on your own, not on Joe on Joe because it's family friendly, but on your own personal, say on Twitter?
Yeah, I'll share it.
If people want to, what's your Twitter handle to be able to share that?
It's you go to @Joe on Joe Pod. Go to Joe on Joe Pod. And follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. Or you can send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the show. Let me know what you think of G.I. Joe. Let me know if you want to be a guest on future episodes. If I get lucky enough to host the show again.
We'll see. You're doing pretty well today.
I would love to hear from you guys. And I will. I'll tweet it out.
And maybe tweet it from your personal account.
No. We don't tweet. We don't tweet Joe and Joe Business from his personal account.
Okay, got it. Separate but equal.
We keep them separate. Because Joe and Joe
equal branches of
Joe
government.
and Joe is for everybody. Joe Slepski has opinions.
He has Yeah, I know. That being said, you'll put that it's not, you'll put like a
mature content.
Got it.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So that the kids don't.
Yes,
the kids.
Yes.
Great.
So it was funny. So it was so crazy. Like, you think about it. Like, it was at the time would have been like 15 years, I think, after we recorded it. Or even almost 20 years after.
We got to hear your
voice.
19-year-old, 20-year-old self.
Yeah. Hey, Adam, I'm dating a girl.
My girlfriend.
But we seem to be getting along fine, but
she doesn't seem to care as much as I care.
Yeah, and
about things that really matter.
Things that matter, like me. And
I will say that your voice has matured.
Yeah,
your voice really has matured. It feels like something has dropped.
It's really well, I finally met someone who reciprocated.
Yeah. Well, please introduce me to her, because she sounds like a lovely lady. Getting back on that.
So I just passion for talk radio. I tried to do a little bit of radio in college.
Oh, did you?
I did. You know me and commitment. So so it was tough. So it was like I didn't make the right time for it, and I never really made. And also, to be honest, to be totally fair to my abilities, I was just trying to emulate Kevin Matthews. I was literally just doing like his voices and stuff.
Funny.
Which is, I think in most fields, to be fair to myself, I think that's kind of how you start, whether it's drawing or, certainly with the podcast, I borrowed from people until you find your own voice.
If I may for a second, in my teaching, so those of you who have heard me, so if you've not heard me on Joe before.
It's been a while. It's
been a while. I am his Tony Randall. Oftentimes, whether he doesn't have a guest or it might be something fun that we as a couple can work on, he asks me to come on to the show.
Which is the case today.
And I think I have been on the show the most.
Yeah.
Outside of you, right? So for those of you
and my friends in G.I. Joe.
There we go. So that being said,
and frankly, your dogs.
My dogs are the most. Let's be fair. Mary Jane Watson and Shirley Feeney, who are resting happily next to us as mom and dad talk for a bit. But the reason I bring it up is that those of you who have heard me on the show before know that I teach sketch comedy at the Second City, and what I'll often say is we all started in comedy with parody. As little kids, we don't create our own stuff. We show to our parents, like when everybody's got to dance and make jokes and do their skits in front of their family, we don't even add to it. We just pretend to be what we see. And then from there, exactly.
In the basement, we would put on lip sync shows every party. We
Duran
would
Duran.
The Monkees.
In my world.
We would all get a song. We did Duran Duran. The girls would want to do Duran Duran. And then I would be
Devo was ours too.
Then we got to do Pleasant Valley Sunday. There's 8mm or 9mm, whatever the old Super 8. There's Super 8.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, Super 8 footage. There's Super 8 footage of us doing Pleasant Valley Sunday.
That is fantastic.
From like 1982.
And so we all get together and we, as storytellers, little kids learning what we think is funny and great, is we mimic what we see, right? So we mimic it. And what you did is you mimicked Kevin Matthews, and that's your young version of it. As a young artist, you also mimicked the comic book artists or the cartoonists that you dug. I'm going to get into that as well. So we talked about your influences in podcasting. Now I want to talk about your influences, especially since we talked about U of I, your influences, because you often bring up not just watching this as a cartoon from the 80s when we were kids, but also on Joe Illustrated, you go into detail of the comic book G.I. Joe, but you also talk about comics of that era and what was happening in a certain time frame, and you go into detail about the comic book artists that you love the most. So I want to spend a little bit of time for those people who've been listening to you for how many episodes are you at now?
This is, I want to say it's episode 138? No, 141.
141.
And that's actually just of episodes. That doesn't include the 5 episodes I think that we did for the PSAs. It doesn't include like Joe on Gem. So we're well. Plus,
so we're somewhere around 150?
Well, if you add Joe on Joe Illustrated, we're easily at 200 episodes.
Wow, that's close to my weight.
Yeah.
Anyways, but 141 is a goal, so there we go that way. Wow, that was bold of me. I'm owning it. I'm a big girl, America. Amazons unite.
Yeah, girl, but you're getting slimmer every day.
But I'm getting slimmer.
We've been eating good the last 6 months.
We've been doing, you went from your code name Deep Dish to Thin Crust.
Thin Crust, yeah. I lost 70 pounds.
You guys, he's lost 70 pounds.
70 pounds.
I'm so proud of my boo.
It's good.
Anyways, so I want to bring up.
Also, well, real quick though, that came from listening to podcasting.
Yes.
Because I listened a lot. I also currently I listen to Kevin Smith still. I can't do Corolla anymore for various political reasons, but whatever. And also it's literally been listening for 10 years. I need a break.
Yeah.
I listened to a lot of Penn Jillette.
Yeah.
And Penn lost a ton of weight, and he wrote a book about it, and I was listening to it for a while, and I was intrigued. Mm-hmm. And so literally from hearing about it on podcasting.
And Kevin Smith, when
he had his heart attack, he followed the Penn Jillette route too. And so I was like, you know what, let me look into this. Let me give it a try. And you and I have been kind of doing it for 6 months. And
so collectively, we've lost 120 pounds.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, I don't know if Kevin Smith is a listener. And Penn Jillette is a listener. It would be great if it did. But, I come from a family of heart disease and weight issues. And my mother was with my stepfather when he had a heart transplant from a massive heart attack. And my grandmother's husband died. My grandfather died of a heart attack. And, who knows what our future will hold. But from this diet and from their influence, they may have saved my husband's life. And I'm a fan. G.I. Joe aside, I'm a fan of this Joe Slepski. So if anybody wants to pass the word along to Mr. Kevin Smith and to Mr. Penn Jillette.
Testimonial.
My family is very, very grateful for sharing the word of their experience, and that's why podcasting is important, right?
Yeah, it is. It's this direct conduit to people and their thoughts. Their thoughts aren't always great. Their thoughts aren't.
Sure.
I mean, everything's not always brilliant.
It's unfiltered.
It's certainly unfiltered. It's certainly unpolished at times. I think
it's how the internet is, right?
Yeah.
Right now, it's still the wild, wild west. It's not cultivated, right?
That's the charm of it. One of my episodes I did with I forget the actual episode show, but I did it with my very, very good and lifelong friend Stephen Hood, and we recorded it in Las Vegas, and we were traveling and whatever, and stuff happened, and my mic was off during most of it, but I was able to rescue the audio from Steve's mic that picked up most of it, and it's not great audio, but I didn't want to lose it because
it was authentic.
Because it was authentic. It was two dudes who like love each other and had fun, and I think it was a lot of fun to listen to, but it was a little harder to listen to, and I never heard boo because I think my listeners understood it.
You also were very upfront. You didn't try to hide anything.
Yeah.
You said, hey, here's the deal.
Yeah.
I'm a human person, and I'm doing this on the road. I do this out of my home.
Yeah. And I think that's cool, though. I think that's there's something about that people really dig and respect because, the other end of the spectrum is that super polished, keep you at arm's length conversation that was dominating the interview world of entertainment, I think, forever.
Because it's marketing.
Right.
You're marketing a narrative.
Yeah. People can't say the right thing or it has to look exactly whatever. And podcasting is like, oh, a car just went off. Oh, okay, yeah, don't worry about it, guys.
Yeah,
We're
dogs
gonna
are losing their minds.
do our best.
Yeah.
But,
And you as a listener, you've given those passes to people you've heard before.
Oh yeah. Oh, I listen to. I'm not gonna put them on blast, but I listen to professional podcasts that I don't think the audio is as good as it should be. But I like them, and I like what they have to say.
And you learned from listening to them, right?
Yeah, and I'm not here to judge,
Right.
But when I hear it, I go, "Oh wow, there's this crack or fuzz or pop or."
And I wonder, my dog is scratching her chin right now, and she's got little bells.
Yeah, I'm sure
and
that's
you hear
picked
it
up. Yeah,
and it's
but
being in our living room at Christmas time right now.
But to me, there's a charm there. Like, oh, that's just a dude in his garage. That's a dude in his house, or. Or they're definitely not in a professional studio, so it's going to pick up a little fuzz, or they're a little too far away from the mic, or they must have recorded this on the road, but that means that they're hustling and working to make content that I want to hear, even outside of a ideal setting. So I think there's a charm there.
And how great that specific to podcasts, that it's you have certain likes, from what we talked about back when you were living in Chicago. Yes, you went to your same comic shop for years. Yes, you got to know the people who are there. But in your group of friends, yes, your best friend loves Star Wars. There's those kind of things. But in your comic book world, you felt like a little bit of an outsider. Come to LA, and it's comic book central, where people of your generation and older, but people of your generation moved out here to make the movies that we all know and love right now, and you're surrounded by them.
Yeah.
So I want to go in a little bit of, yes, talking about podcasting, but also talking about how you picked this as a niche for you, podcasting, but podcasting specifically about G.I. Joe and what you bring to G.I. Joe Illustrated and such, talking about comic books in general.
Well, so how I chose G.I. Joe is I am I grew up. I mean, G.I. Joe was my thing. So G.I. Joe, I loved Star Wars, but Star Wars Return of the Jedi came out when I was 8 years old. So I believe that stuff that you're into between like 8 to like 11 or 12, like that 4-year span, I think that's the stuff that tends to stay with you. People are like, oh man, I love Turtles. Well, how old were you at the time? I was like 9, 10.
See, that's the problem. I was into McDonald's.
Yeah.
See, that's the problem. Now it makes sense.
And I think that's like the era. So for me, it just happened to be G.I. Joe that I found at the time. And for those that we'll say 4-year span, 3-4 year span, that was my collection blew up. Like I loved it. I loved everything about it.
And was that before you got into comic books?
Yeah. Yeah, it was before I got into comics. It sparked just a passion for collecting, for kind of get them all kind of a thing. Whether it's the cart on the back of the cards, they had little checklists. Like I had that guy, had the guy. They always had the inserts that you could, like little mini catalog inserts. my favorite part of getting a new vehicle was putting it together. I was a big model kid too. I did a lot of models. I had a lot of models on my shelves.
Great.
And
my brothers did too.
Yeah.
They did a lot of like airplanes and stuff.
A ton of airplanes, and I used to do aircraft carriers and stuff like that. And I didn't come from a military family, but I just I like putting things together like that, you know. And I don't, it's specifically strange, like don't like cars. Like I don't care about cars. I've never cared about cars. I have no passion for cars. So
Great, because we are keeping this Fast and the Furious free.
Yeah. So but you
Inside
say that,
joke.
But The Rock,
he is in love
Road
with Fast and the Furious.
I don't like cars. So when I was put models together, I only put together airplanes and stuff. I probably had a couple cars, like, but they had to be like gimmick cars, like the Dukes of Hazzard.
Sure,
you know what I mean, like those things.
Yeah. I want to bring up to connect what today is and G.I. Joe and the collecting is that Christmas time. Your mom.
It's Christmas time.
Yeah, is here.
No need to be afraid.
Yeah, sing it. So your mom really dug Christmas.
Oh yes.
You guys had great Christmases, right? And so your quote unquote collecting, right, comes from your mom really understanding what you loved.
Yeah.
Giving you the opportunity. And luckily, you guys were in a place of, Midwestern family, middle class family, but in a place where mom was able to give you some pretty awesome Christmases.
My parents were very generous. My mom was very generous. I think even my dad would agree. Give all credit to my mom because she kind of she just ran it. You know? But so I grew up later in reflection. I feel like there's like two types of average families. There's some families that give all year round because money's not any kind of an object.
Yeah.
But we were the family that, throughout the year it was a lot of hard work and a lot of saving up your allowance. We had an allowance. Saving up your allowance. Do you have any allowance money? And then you can buy a toy. I'm not buying a toy for you. Save up. It's your birthday or it's Christmas.
Yeah.
And my birthday's in July.
Yeah.
And Christmas is, when's Christmas? December 25th.
Yeah.
So
tomorrow, because we're podcasting on Christmas Eve morning.
So it was like we fell into that category. I don't think we're alone here in that building up for Christmas. Wait for Christmas. Wait for Christmas. And so we 100% would put together lists and there's a lot of people are like, I don't like putting together lists for Christmas. Yes and no. I get there's a materialistic aspect to it. Of course, that's kind of gross. But on the other hand, it made my mom's life so much easier.
And why not get them something that they want versus the disappointment of you get somebody something and then they have that look of disappointment, right?
That Sears catalog came, the service merchandise
Ours
catalog.
was JCPenney's. Ours was the Penny's catalog.
JCPenney's. I would flip to the toy section and I would grab the pen or the marker.
Did you dog ear them? Did you dog ear them as well?
Oh, yeah.
It was before Post-its even existed, I think.
Start circling. I'm like, I want the killer whale. I never got a shark, but I wanted a shark. I want a dragonfly. I need,
Are those all G.I. Joe toys?
Yeah, I want an Awe Striker. Of course, I would always be like, I want a USS Flag. That came out in 1985. It was the $100 giant 6 foot.
Did you ever
literally,
get that?
No. A lot
that's
of.
outside of.
A lot of kids didn't. It was.
That's outside of the.
Yeah, but it's funny though. It was. It was a lot of money at the time. It was $100 at the time. And for reference,
that's a lot. That's 80s $100. That's
for
a lot.
The other biggest toy was the Cobra Terrordrome, which I believe retailed for around $60, and my mom totally hooked me up with that.
Oh,
and it was great. But you could see my arms; it was about maybe double the size of a basketball hoop around. Like it was huge.
Yeah,
right?
he's putting his arms out. Joe is 6'3", a big guy, and this is
it was a huge
like a
toy.
cauldron.
The flag was 6 feet long.
What?
You once you
who
put
could even fit it in your house?
That was the problem that a lot of people. It wasn't so much about spending the money because my mom would spend way more than $100 on all the toys combined. There was no room for it.
Yeah,
and I remember having that conversation with my mom in the store, being like, "But it's so big." Like I don't
you
know.
were being reasonable.
Yeah, because I had a
Mom, I'm looking out for our family.
I had a train set, an HO scale train set.
I don't know what HO means.
Oh, it's a scale. I forget exactly what it means, but it's a certain type of scale of model trains. There were two types, and so you could buy different brands of trains or cars or sections as long as it was HO scale, or the other scale was a different width of the track.
Oh, got it.
So
okay.
I had a train set in the basement. And my dad built this awesome plywood board that he put fake grass on, and so the train would live on there, and we nailed it down. Yeah, and it was the whole thing. It eventually got broken in a
shout out to Ski in Maryland.
Yeah, it eventually got broken in a basement game of dodgeball, but we won't go there. That I wasn't around for. But then it was replaced with. Ooh. It was then replaced though because we had this big board. My parents were great, and they got me a trucking set too. I never got the GI Joe. The GI Joe did a train set too, which is pretty sweet. Yeah. But I got replaced with so basically I always had this active set, and it was like, well, if I got the flag, I would have to tear that thing down, and that's the only place it could live, in the basement.
Wow.
And it just that wasn't. I was like, nah, like we're good.
And in your collection now, you do not own that 6 foot.
No. It's now it sells
and
for.
And as the wife,
it sells for $500 to $1,000.
Wow.
Now. Yeah.
So as the wife in a 1-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles, California, I'm happy. Granted, it would probably be in the box as a collection, but to be fair, I'm very happy living amongst your 38,000 comic books. I appreciate that isn't part of the collection.
Our friend Jeremiah, you remember Jeremiah? This guy's a friend of the show. He just got one.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I think he might technically be like watching it for a friend because his friend. If I'm Jeremiah, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I think because his friend didn't have the space for it. Like he had it, and he was like, I have nowhere to put it up. So here, you hold it, you use it, you put it up, and then we'll share it. Because it's great. It's just the best toy.
So Christmases and birthdays added to the collection. Watching the show was what was inspired between the ages of 8 and 11. And from there, longer, about that time, actually, how long it was on TV, right?
Yeah, it was on from like 82, 83 till like 87 was the movie. And then I didn't watch past 87. And
so that's where you got kind of the start in G.I. Joe. And then from there, was it G.I. Joe comic books?
Yeah, for Easter, my mom.
That then moved into you becoming a comic book. Your interest in comic books.
Yeah.
So this is G.I. Joe is your gateway into the world that you love.
It's the Rosetta Stone, 100%. It's
I'm getting a little emotional over that because I know how much you love comic books and the understanding of this cartoon that was on in your youth.
And by the way, real quick, there is someone's car alarm going off, but we're going to power through it. Just exactly what we were talking about earlier.
Power through it. It's the charm. This is authentic, y'all. But that this cartoon from our youth, and I don't know when it was on. For me, it was on if I was homesick from school. In Ohio, it wasn't on like mainstream time unless it was on the weekend, right?
No, it was on after. It was on after school.
Yours was.
It was pretty much nationwide. It was on like when it was the meat era of it. It was on like after school.
And I never watched it because I was into girly
stuff.
Whatever,
that'd be like 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, something like that.
Yeah, I would only see it that additional time when I was home from school because they had it during the daytime too.
They eventually started showing them in the mornings.
I think that's when.
And WGN, which is was a national signal at the time. I don't know if it still is, but WGN had G.I. Joe. So everyone saw G.I. Joe. Everyone had the opportunity to see G.I. Joe.
Yeah. So that this thing from our youth was your Rosetta Stone, was your your gateway drug into comic books. And so from here, you started reading for Easter. Your mother would give you the G.I. Joe comics.
So Easter basket, you get some stuff. And I had previously, I had a smattering of comic books, and they were cool. And I loved Superman. I loved Superman since I saw it when I was 3-4 years old. Like I was a big Superman fan of the movie, and every time it would air on CBS, I'd always be in front of the TV and stuff. But it never really translated into the comics for me.
And really quickly before you get to that, it's just me knowing you. I'm going to give you some, just kind of take a moment. What is it about Superman that really, I mean, besides it being a superhero, you've told me it, and it's an emotional answer to me. What about Superman is important? Because I think it has to do with G.I. Joe as well.
Oh, his moral stance on things, just of like, be honest, don't lie, don't be an asshole. Yeah. And I'm going to leave that in the show. Like that's kind of it. Like just don't.
Because G.I. Joe is G.I. Joe and Cobra. Yeah. Snakes against.
Yeah.
Right.
And life's tough, and and everything is clear and clear cut, and there's certain compromises you have to make sometime. But you usually find your way if you're just when Christopher Reeve's talking to Margot Kidder, and he's just like, I never lie, Miss Lane, like that kind of a thing. And there's a clarity in his eyes of. No, you could trust me because whatever. He's funny. He says I never lie, as he's going to pretend to be Clark Kent 5 minutes later, right?
Yeah, right.
But even as a kid, though, I saw that, and what I knew what that meant was his intentions were true, and he wasn't lying. He was protecting. Even in the lie, he was protecting. But
that you love G.I. Joe, and their job is to protect us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong. We can get into war. We can get into the military. We can get into that and say there's all that other stuff. But as a kid, and the moral stuff.
So I can get to that. I can get to that, actually. So the first time I read G.I. Joe was G.I. Joe #1. My parents bought me a copy of it when we flew to Florida in like 1983, whatever year. It was right after the actual book was on the stands. We bought it at the newsstand in the airport.
Oh, fun.
Right. But I had not, I think I had maybe gotten Snake Eyes at that point, but
the toy.
The toy, yeah. But I definitely wasn't watching the cartoon yet, and it didn't resonate with me. But if collectors know, the first issue of the comic book, it was absolutely comic book size, but it was formatted like a magazine.
Interesting.
There was nothing about that book that made me think there was ever going to be an issue 2, because I wasn't comic book as stores as a dedicated store were really only about 10 years old at that time.
Really?
Yeah, they started in the early mid 70s. So 82, 83, 84, they were only about 10 years old. So there weren't a lot of, you weren't walking down the street going, let's go to the comic book shop. There was no such thing. You were only still getting it on spinner racks at 7-Elevens and at grocery stores. So,
interesting.
So there was nothing in me to seek out issue 2.
Got it.
Now I say that, maybe there was a teaser in the back of that magazine that said pick up issue 2. I don't know, but I don't remember it. And I absolutely remember being surprised, fast forward 3-4 years, when my mom handed me the G.I. Joe Comics magazine, small size, digest size collection that Marvel was putting out that was collecting 2, 3, 4 issues at a time. You guys, listeners, you know the one I'm talking about, the digest size reprints. And I was like, what? They kept doing these? I was like, I didn't know any of this. And then that opened the floodgate. And I was like, where did you get these? And she goes, 7-Eleven. I was like, can we go back to 7-Eleven and get them? Yeah. So we went back to 7-Eleven. We grabbed whatever was on the shelf. We got more G.I. Joe. Then she looked up and was like, there's a store that only sells comic books. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, it's called Moondogs.
That was your first store?
Yeah, it was out in Alsip. And I was like...
Alsip, which is where?
Alsip, Illinois. Like
right, so people who don't know. So you're from the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, south side Chicago, yeah.
Got it.
And so then she drove me over there, and this would have been early summer. We were on our way to a picnic, I believe. And I was like, hi. And I saw all the comics in the store, and I saw characters I'd never known existed. X-Men and Legion and, literally every other superhero outside of the main, core teams. And I was like, what is going on in here? But I was just like, I just want these. And he goes, well, we have all these. I remember the guy goes, well, we have all these. And they were actually the regular issues of G.I. Joe. And I was like, no, I just want these digests. And he's like, but these are the real issues. I go, no, I only want these. That didn't last long. Eventually I started getting the regular issues and so on and so forth. And for about a year or so, I collected those, and that would have taken me to about 1988.
And that was a trip you would take with your mom.
Yeah,
your mom would
she would take
me.
Yeah, because I was 12, 13. So then, so then she found a shop on 111th Street that was closer called Hero Land, and Hero Land, I went in, and then I would buy the regular J. Joe issues, and I was buying back issues and getting all the issues I needed. At that point, J. Joe was only around like 40 some issues or something. And we're nearing it on Joe and Joe Illustrated. We're nearing the time when I first came on. And then my first book that I got that wasn't G.I. Joe was X-Men, because I was reading about it a lot. And I was like, oh, people are talking about these X-Men. I don't know what they are. They seem pretty cool. And I looked at, in the shelf, there was 2 books. There was Uncanny X-Men, and then there was X Factor. And Uncanny X-Men was in the 240s or 230s at the time. And X Factor was only around like issue 24, 25, which, if listeners know, that's the first Archangel. It's the Apocalypse fighting for Fall of the Mutants. It's a big deal, like a big deal. And so my first X Factor was the issue after Fall of the Mutants. It was the Christmas issue. And I was like, this seems standalone.
Look at that.
Yeah, right?
Full circle.
Yeah, I was like, this seems standalone. So I picked it up, and it was amazing. It was Walter Simonson. He drew it. That's favorite, right? That's why it imprinted on me, because it was literally.
I mean, also his work is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But it imprinted.
It was the first mainstream comic art that I got exposed to, outside of the wonderful Rod Wiggum and Herb Trimpe and all the guys that did G.I. Joe. if you know the Joe comic is very grounded in real, real world. Even all throughout all the artists, they always draw them very real because they're either toyetic or they're built to look like real humans. You go to a superhero book and it's superpowers and there's flashbang and it's more comic booky. There's more of a stylized
If you
look
like
to
this
them.
talk, you should definitely subscribe to Joe on Joe Illustrated
Go to
on Patreon.
Patreon.com/JoeandJoePod.
Because if you're getting turned on by listening to him talk about all these different artists and listen to him geek out is a positive way to say it, nerd out over this, more and more of this. I hear it once a week and I walk through and I have a little giggle listening to my sweet, sweet man just talk about this medium that he loves so much. So from there, actually, this is a great opportunity to take a pause for a commercial for your sponsors.
Oh, we are going to hear our
And then
sponsor.
we'll be right back, and we will go on to this extended interview with Joe Slepski of Joe on Joe.
Joe and Joe listeners know that I love comic books, G.I. Joe, pop culture, and my wife and dogs are pretty great too. I also love learning how people get to where they're at and where they're going. All of that comes together over at the Dreamer Comics podcast, except for my family stuff. That'd be really weird. Omar Spahi interviews someone from the comic industry every episode, and they break down the journey that creator took to get from reading comics to creating them. Comic luminaries like Jim Valentino, Ross Ritchie, Kyle Higgins, and so many more can be found at DreamerComicsPodcast.com or find them anywhere you get your podcasts. Everyone has a dream. Learn how to make yours a reality. Hey, listeners, if you're anything like me, all apologies to your family. I'm just kidding. It's likely that they made you this way. No, I'm talking about that I'm always looking for more G.I. Joe content, and I think I found it. Stop what you're doing. Okay, don't stop listening to this podcast. Can't you multitask? And go to Facebook/Special Mission Force. Brian Wilkins is curating all kinds of wonderful, nostalgic G.I. Joe content, including new pics from his fantastic Instagram page at Special Mission Force. On his Instagram, he's taking photos of Joes out in the wild, in the real world, doing stuff. For me, the two things that stand out the most are his variety of characters that he takes pictures of and like the depth of field in these pictures. It's just a wonderful job of directing focus for you. I think you really will enjoy his work. So like him on Facebook, follow him on Instagram and Twitter, and get ready for his website, specialmissionforce.com. He's a name to watch in the G.I. Joe game, so get on board now. Now back to the show.
Okay, we are back. Let's continue talking to our guest, Joe Slepski,
Oh my God,
the
I'm so excited
host
to be
and
here.
creator of the Joe on Joe podcast that you are currently listening to. So you had your gateway, your Rosetta Stone, was the G.I. Joe cartoon. Then for Easter and such, your mother would buy you, and Christmas, she would buy you the toys, but she got you interested in the G.I. Joe comic. Then you became interested in comic books themselves.
Yes.
So right now, as an additional part of what you do for a living, you do work at a comic book shop on Saturdays. You're going to be there anyways, so you might as well work in it, right? And what was your comic book shop in? So you mentioned some comic book shops in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, which makes sense why your handle on your Joe character is formerly deep dish, currently old style.
Yes.
Because of your deep Chicago roots.
Yeah.
But so in Chicago eventually, what was your long-term comic book shop?
10th Planet, 95th and 95th and Cicero.
And that was for how long in your youth? Oak Lawn.
That was throughout high school. So Hero Land was the big one, and that was the first one, and that was on 111th Street and Harlem in Worth, Illinois.
Got it.
And if anyone's driving through town, anyone ever driven through Chicago, you know Worth, because when you're driving on 294, which is huge, and it's the way to cut through.
What do we call it? 294. We call it a name.
I don't know. 294.
Isn't that one of the ones that has like a name? It's
no,
like the
actually, I don't think 294 does.
Okay.
No, I don't think it does.
It's not worth
the Dan
a name.
Ryan is no.
See what I did there?
If you ever cut through 294 in Chicago, it's the tollway. You've gone past a water tower, huge water tower right on the side that says Worth, the friendly village. So there you go. So there's a little reference for you guys.
This is a new discovery, and I want to bring it up quickly. Speaking of the south side of Chicago, speaking of our youth, you made a discovery of someone who was buried near your neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy. Yeah.
What is that?
Well, the discovery, I've always known he was buried there, but the discovery was that Buck Rogers referenced it. Mayor Daley, the old-time corrupt, long-time mob boss Mayor Daley, is buried across the street from my house. So if you guys ever Google it, you know that I grew up about 2 blocks away from that. Like he's right at about 112th and McVicker in the Holy Sepulchre Cemetery, and I grew up at 109th and McVicker. So what's that? 2-3 blocks. So we've always known that. Not a big deal. Whatever. Cemetery. Southside's littered with Catholic cemeteries. Just littered. I grew up around so many cemeteries, it seems normal to me.
Well, it's known for cemeteries and filtering mob money, right?
Yes.
Isn't that what your town is known for?
And I'm recently reading an issue of Buck Rogers, the comic book adaptation from 1979, I think, that was adapting the TV show. And in it, in order to prove that he's on Earth 1,000 years in the future, Buck, who was from Chicago, he's like, "Oh, I'm from Chicago. I'm going to go and venture out and see if I can, see what this new landscape is about. I don't believe that I'm on the Earth." He finds Mayor Daley's grave, and he goes, "Oh my God, it's Mayor Daley. That means I really am on Earth. Holy cow!" It's his Statue of Liberty moment from Planet of the Apes, right? Like this proves that he is. Well, that's 2 blocks away from my house. Buck Rogers was in Chicago Ridge.
That is fantastic. I want you. Is that something you can share? Can you share that on the Joe?
Yeah,
you have a picture of it. Can you share that on that?
We tweeted it out. Yeah, we did fantastic. A couple weeks back when I discovered it. But I lost my mind because it is very specific, and I guarantee that when they wrote it, they didn't actually look up where he was buried because he would have only been dead a few years. I'm sure they didn't it was just more of, hey, here's a famous dead guy.
Yeah.
And it's prominent Chicago, and they probably even thought that he was buried in Chicago. Oh no, he's buried. I learned to drive where Buck Rogers proved his location. Okay, I know people. People used to get drunk where Buck Rogers proved his location. I used to go fishing where Buck Rogers proved his location.
Love it.
I would cut through the cemetery to go play hockey where Buck Rogers proved his location.
Would you hold your breath when you would drive by it?
No,
oh,
no,
yeah. I'm superstitious. We hold our breaths when we go by a graveyard.
No, that was the thing. If you did that on the south side of Chicago, you would die of asphyxiation because you would never breathe.
There we go.
There are cemeteries everywhere. So that's it.
So what was the name of that comic shop?
So that was Hero Land.
Great.
That was Hero Land, and then there was Drama, which is a funny, very funny footnote to that. Recently, and this was written about years ago, so maybe I think I wrote a blog post about it like 10 years ago, but one of the former employees of that, which I sort of kind of think I remember, but I kind of don't, wrote this scathing, multi-part, scrawling, epic blog post about the drama behind the scenes at my local comic shop.
Called Drama.
Like who was sleeping with who, and who was abusive to who, and who was stealing from what. And I'm reading this and going, oh my God, I remember all these people from when I was 10 years old and all this stuff. Because I was, just an impressionable kid, just not a part of the scene, so to speak. But there was drama that 2 of the dudes that I enjoyed there, they left the company. And I read how it was, I read about it in this blog post 20 years after the fact. So I never knew the drama, and I'm reading this blog post, and they allude to the reasons that these guys left, and they formed a place called 10th Planet over at 95th and Cicero, and I quickly switched allegiances over there because I like those dudes. And so then I went to 10th Planet for a year, forever, until 10th Planet until I moved into the city around 2000-ish, and
then
switched to
your long term
Graham Cracker Comics for about the next next 10 years or so was Graham Cracker Comics, and then we've been out here in Los Angeles. So in 30 some years of comic collecting, I've had like 4 shops. 5 shops if you include the shop in Champaign. But
what was that shop? Is it still around?
Remember the name? No, I don't remember the name of it, and I never really liked them that much. But it was the only shop in town.
All right, and then now your shop is
Golden Apple Comics.
Golden Apple Comics,
best comic shop in LA.
Oldest.
Yeah, 40 hitting 40 years this year. This will be our big 40th year, and we got it's a ton of people always come through, famous people working in the industry, people, awesome customers, people from other countries. We had some people in there from France yesterday. They were very excited to get some Captain America stuff to bring home. There was a dude from Mexico City was in there the other day, and we had Mobius books that he was just blowing his mind over. So yeah, it's good. Golden Apple's great, and Golden Apple's got a strong web presence too. We do a lot of variant covers that you can buy exclusive through us on our website, and then we also are publishing two books called Adventure Van, and we had guests of the show Richard Fairgray on for Blastosaurus, which Blastosaurus was just designated as one of the 51, I think, silver tier or something like what I think that's the name of the tier, Free Comic Book Day comics.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so Blastosaurus is going to be on Free Comic Book Day. Everyone here that's listening, when you go to your local shops for Free Comic Book Day, one of the books you're going to be able to get is a Blastosaurus comic from Golden Apple Books. It's very exciting.
That's great. And Golden Apple's website and information is what?
Yeah, goldenapplecomicbooks.com.
And do they have a Twitter and a Facebook presence at all if they want to follow it?
I think it's GA Comics. G Apple Comics or something like that.
Great. So if people listen to this who are not part of the Hollywood area, they can participate by.
Yep. And it's funny, I've had guests that are fans of the show come through town and stop at Golden Apple because here's Joe on Joe. Yeah, so it's fun.
I love it. So one other question.
And I always try to keep a good stock of J. Joe comics in the back issue bin.
Yo, Joe.
Faux show.
Yo, Joe. Faux show. So Joe Slepski, what I know about you and what some people know about you, but what your listeners may not know is that, yes, you enjoy G.I. Joe cartoons. You enjoy comic books. You are a collector of those, but you yourself are a writer and an artist.
I am.
What is your background? What did you had mentioned that you worked in radio a little bit in college, but you specifically worked as an artist and writer in college.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I background is very much like everyone else who reads comics. You start drawing them. So I started drawing them. I started aping Walter Simonson was my first one. So my styles got flourishes of that. We'll always have that. And then high school art. All I wanted to do was draw comics instead of take the art. So eventually that led to Sour Waters, which was too bad because I did some really good stuff and like I knew I could have. That is one of those like late great life laments that I kind of put that down. Because all I wanted, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to put the right amount of focus and attention on it. Isn't that the
lament of many comic artists, comic writers? Because what I hear, so you're hearing that you wanted to draw that, but your fine art teachers, and I know that you had teachers that really did affect you and that you cared about, but
they were wonderful.
They want you to be fine artists and you to follow in a particular direction when you, as a youngster, are choosing your own way and you wanted to draw comics. And we were on this game show recently, and when I was talking about stories, I was talking about you liking comic books, and they were like, no, like legitimate literature. And I, as your wife, was ready to like rip a head off because it is a legitimate literature. Yeah. It just is its own media.
It's its own language. Yeah. I've been very fond lately, last few years, of referring to it as its own language, and it is. There's a lot to be learned, and of course, there's a lot of garbage out there. But you know what? There's a lot of Dean Koontz out there too. Like, there's garbage everywhere, everybody. You know, it is its own language, and not to bristle you with it, but you don't like comic books, and because I don't think
I don't not like them. I don't appreciate the genre because it doesn't speak to me.
Exactly, and I because you didn't come up on it. I think there's a language thing there, and it's.
There are people who do not like Shakespeare. I enjoy Shakespeare.
Right.
It's just everybody has their. Yeah. That's why there are so many things out there, so that everyone can create new things, and everyone can find their niche.
What I think the job of the teachers were, and I think they did it well, was to expose you to everything and to not have you overlook anything, so that you could eventually go off and find your own thing. And where I was at was I wanted to just do my own thing. Yeah. And that's where I ran afoul of my artistic ambitions. You know, I was looking at going to art school. I was like seriously thinking about that. But all I wanted to do was draw comic books, you know. And you hear that story professional artists who actually, go on and work in the field, like that's their story, but I was never able to buckle down and focus on it. I did that, but I also played football and I played hockey and I played video games. So I had a lot that I was taking my attention away.
Sure.
And it was never that one thing that was like I was doing it 18 hours a day because I was doing everything 18 hours a day,
But isn't that the way that you're raising your kids? We raise our kids to be well-rounded humans. And then
sure.
we've got those particular, like, quote-unquote tiger moms that focus on the kid. They're one thing, and it's piano, and it's that all the time.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to give your kid a well-rounded life, you want to give them a bunch of experiences.
Yeah, it's weird. Sometimes I do lament that. Sometimes that like I wish I had just been like, all I want to do is this and that's all I want to do. But,
my
I
best
never,
friend Jeff was locked in his room for hours playing piano, and luckily it worked out for him that he loves playing piano.
Yeah.
But he held that he was not a fan of the forced practice.
Yeah.
Granted, if he's listening, he might say no.
I mean, I played saxophone. I don't know if you know this about me.
What?
I played the saxophone. I played 80 sax.
Wait a second, everyone. I'm getting close. I don't enjoy 80 sax now, but I do. I do have a history of loving Johnny Depp as a sax-playing 21 Jump Street young cop.
Yeah, well, it was that.
You played the saxophone?
It was that. It was that era of where everyone had to do a band instrument. You know, and my sisters did flute and I did saxophone, and I hated practicing. I liked doing it. But I just wanted to get to playing songs, and that's the story of my life. I just want to get to doing it. I don't want to,
And is that why you love yourself some Clarence Clemens so much?
Oh, maybe.
Your sax background.
I mean, I didn't play it long. I did it for like a year, but I just never practiced it.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, so that was the base. And then you get to college, and my buddy John Bologna, shout out John.
An amazing artist in his own right.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Such a good artist and an amazing art teacher. He's really changing
great
lives.
Family, yeah,
great family. He and his wife are so
wonderful stuff.
He and his wife are so creative. Amy, shout out to Amy as well. We have several pieces of their artwork that they have given us for our wedding. They gave us a Green Lantern with our pup painting, original from John Bologna, and Amy. I commissioned her to make a beautiful Bruce Springsteen painting that is in your office, which is one of the most beautiful pieces of art that I've ever seen. So shout out to them. We love them very much.
And John was working for the newspaper. So he was like, hey, we're looking for artists. I know you draw. So so I was like, all right. So I did political cartoons for a year, and I loved it. And it was great. And it was like just to accent the writer's commentary. So it took a lot of the heavy lifting of thought out of it. That was my job. My job was to not get my own political theory. There's a whole trick, like there's a skill to it.
It's satire.
Yeah, but it's not your satire. It's reading what the guy wrote.
Meaning
my personal satire. It's not my opinion. It's taking what you wrote and saying, I need to come up with a picture that best illustrates. It's the Marvel method of making comic books. Here's someone going, here's a script or here's a plot, and then I have to come up with a picture that accentuates it. But I don't necessarily have to stick to it, but I have to represent it in a certain way.
Interesting.
And so I would do that, and I would do one or two of those a week for the whole year. And sometimes
you always had like a monkey involved, right?
No, that was different.
Oh, okay, got it.
That was different. So that was great, and that's what I did I did that exclusively for about 6 months, I believe, and it was really, really cool. And we were like doing like Two-Face stuff. I remember doing a Clinton Two-Face that was spot on and awesome. And we would throw in. I did one where it was Rocky fighting Clubber Lang or fighting Creed. It was Rocky Creed with Mickey in the corner, and they were like representing like Illinois taxes and something else with the Democrats and this. It was great. It was great. And a lot of like Champagne-centric politics stuff, which course. I don't care about, but
that's where you were, and that's what you were writing
the writers
for.
were writing about it, so I had to learn about it. I had to learn what various local issues were. Then
the circulation of that newspaper was pretty big.
The U of I circulation was the largest in the country.
Interesting.
Yeah, and or if not the largest, it was like one of the top three.
Isn't that also where the internet was created?
It was. Yeah. Al Gore came and spit it out.
He kept it in a lockbox for a long time.
And so then a spot opened on the weekend weekend, and they're like, hey, you want to do a weekend comic strip? So then for the next 6 months, I did a weekend comic strip called Freelance Badass, involving a monkey and a team of heavy hitters, kind of like the A-Team. And then the next year they were like, well, we have a whole weekday slot open. So I was like, all right, so let's do a weekday comic. And I did Freelance Justice. And so they did a 5-day week comic. And it's funny about that. So you guys, a lot of people are like, I can't believe you never miss a week on Joe and Joe, and you do it week in, week out, you know, and we're doing it. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of, I get that from my high school football coach, Coach Garrett Horner, rest in peace. Work ethic. Like, you're here for a commitment, show up, do it. But with Freelance Justice, I never missed a week because like, they never had to run reruns because mine was sequential. Mine was a narrative. So they never had to run reruns until the day that I thought they ran a rerun, and I got pissed.
Dun, dun, dun.
And so I submitted the same one again. So then I purposely reran a rerun. But the problem was, when I thought they ran a rerun, I was looking at yesterday's newspaper.
Hubris. Fatal flaw.
Hubris, not looking at the details, realizing that our newspaper delivery guy maybe delivered the wrong paper, or I just picked up the wrong paper. But I picked up that morning's paper, which was my habit, to see my stuff in print, and it was yesterday's. It was the previous day's print, and I was upset. I
But
was
ego got in the
furious.
way, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then
Isn't that a story of all of our lives, though? When our ego is out of
instead
check.
of looking at the details.
Yeah.
I was just so angry. So the only time I ran a rerun was because I thought they ran a rerun instead of running.
And
the
no
original.
one said, "Hey, this is a rerun, bro."
No one cared. No one cared.
It's kind of like if you did a rerun of this. It's like people do, but they'll live through it. It's
no
fine.
one cared. No one cared.
Isn't that? And I will just say that how we get ourselves in trouble, where the details, right?
Yeah.
Ego out of check. You get mad, and then you realize in the long run we're so small.
Yeah.
We're so small that even in that huge newspaper, nobody noticed.
Nobody
Maybe
noticed.
the readers did.
Yeah, and
But
I
other
had a-
people
I had
didn't
a
notice.
couple
And it
readers.
just shows how don't get us wrong, there is self-importance, right? But we can't be too self-important, because in the long run we're just a little speck, right?
Totally.
So you went. So then fast forward. You worked in that. You're building your collection. You're loving it. And this is how we. So I'm going to include how we met, because I find it important. It all comes back to G.I. Joe. It's very
It
weird.
really does.
But it all comes back to G.I. Joe, that you were working, you know, as with many different businesses, a company shut down, you were on, you were laid off, you were living, on the severance package, that kind of stuff, and you made a decision that changed your life forever.
Somewhere there's
leading
there's
question.
Somewhere there's a sliding door with a happier.
You shut your
shut
damn
your
mouth.
mouth.
So you decided, people had said often to you that you're really funny. You're really funny. You're a funny guy. You're a funny guy. You're very funny. You should try something. What is it that they told you to try, and you made that decision?
Well, it wasn't so much that people told me to try it. I wouldn't say
okay.
I wouldn't phrase it like that. It was I've always loved SNL and I didn't know what improv was, but like I was a fan of comedy and comedy sketch and all that stuff, and I knew Second City was.
And
in
Chris
Chicago.
Farley particularly
Chris
is
Farley was it was great.
major in your life, right?
Yeah. I love Farley.
You had the best impersonation of what? Fat man in a small jacket.
Fat man in a little coat.
And super fans. I mean, being
yeah,
a
of
Chicagoan
course.
and loving
Of course.
the 85 Bears.
Yes, of course. So, so when I get laid off, and it was the 2000, it was the start of the recession. You know, it was part of that, and I was working in print media. You know, so it was print magazine. So it was kind of like, we gotta go. But the great thing was, I was in just a position in life that I could afford to take a little time off and kind of reassess. And after a few months of reflection, I was like, you know what? What I always had in me was, and I still have it, and I hesitate saying this publicly just because it sounds weird. There's like, I do have a little bit of a creative fire that's always been there, whether it was in the art or whether it was whatever. Because I did some writing for the newspaper too. I had a comic book review strip too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's great.
It was called Comic Book Joe.
You're so
I'm on
cute.
brand. I'm on brand.
You're so cute.
So Yeah, you could Google it. They've
Comic
archived
Book
it.
Joe.
Yeah, because it wasn't online then. It was 96, 97, 98. So it was like right on the verge of people.
So
like we had emails.
Joe On has been around for quite some time.
Yeah.
It just didn't necessarily have that name, but it's Joe On.
Yeah. I got a brand. So so it was I just woke up one day and was like, you know what, I need to this is the opportunity that I'm going to look back and say, if I don't try these different things that I'm interested in, I'll never know if it's something I could have done.
Great.
And so one of them was writing long form, like screenplay stuff, and one of them, and at the same time I was like, well, I want to try improv to see what that's all about, see performance stuff.
Because you'd never really performed.
No. And then I was
So-
also, and then
so,
also they
your
had
voice
Second City had a deal that was like, if you sign up for a second class, you get a discount, and that's what led me to take your class. So if Second City had not run that deal, Rebekah, you and I would not have met. And
if
I
you
mean
were not
that
so frugal.
sincerely. Well, I was unemployed.
Sure,
you want me
right?
to waste the government's money?
It wasn't the government.
I was on.
Okay,
So
got
yeah, that was when Obama extended the. Extended unemployment benefits.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I totally was unemployed. I was on unemployment for like the entire time that. Yeah.
And I didn't think about that of you not being a performer yet, that your opinions had always been through your writing or through your hand. I mean, through writing and drawing, right? And this time you were also going into the performance of it. So you take this improv class. So you wrote a screenplay, which is amazing. You take this improv class. You're learning your voice that way, right? And because of being frugal and because Second City offered the 2-for-1 or the discount or whatever, you take this writing course. You're there. You're with a crew of folks that you start getting along with, right? Because that's the ensemble nature of writing classes that you go from.
It's the best thing I can recommend to anyone going into any kind of creative field. Find a crew and work together. You will all work on different projects. You will all go your different ways. But rising tides lift all ships. And someone's going to hook. Someone's going to catch. Someone's going to hit it. And then they're going to turn and they're going to go, man, I need support with this. I've been working with my friend Joe, my friend Ramel, my friend Anna, my friend Alex, fill in the blank. I'm going to bring them with me because I need help, because I just got a great opportunity and I want to form my crew. And you've already had your crew in place. So that is the biggest thing that I can say for whatever kind of group, community, even if the activity is kind of solitary, artistry, painting, writing for the most part is a solitary thing. Find a crew, whether it's through a class or through a group that you all read each other's work
and
together.
they know you and they can call you out. They can call you out. They can tell you the truth because you trust them and you care about them, and you know that they're going to do the same. You're going to do the same for them in the long run.
Yeah, that is so vital, because as you get older and grow, those are going to be the people that you take with you, and they take you with them.
In my case, when after we started dating and we decided that we wanted to move to LA, you came out to visit LA and you stayed with my crew.
Yep.
That when I moved from San Francisco to Chicago to take classes at the Second City, my friend Kevin, my friend Doug, you stayed on Kevin's couch. You went out for lunch with them. And those pals in 2002 were in my writing class, and we're all out in LA together. I helped Kevin with potentially working for the company I work with. He brings me in to audition for stuff that he's writing on. And my friend Lisa and I created a writing class and an acting studio together. And we all came from the Second City as students in the writing class. We did what all people at the Second City do when you create your own sketch comedy group. We were called Shine On You Crazy Diamonds with a Z, which is what you did with your crew from your writing class. Based off of comic books
G.I. Joe.
and G.I. Joe.
Wrote a G.I. Joe sketch, brought it into class one day. It was very funny, but absolutely died in the room.
And why was that?
Because no one in the room, it was funny, but it also wasn't written for a wide audience.
Right.
So it was written for a very specific audience. So no one in the room got any of the references. And we left that night and we said, man, if anyone knew anything about G.I. Joe, they would be laughing their balls off at this. And then we said, you know what we really should do? We should really put this on in front of a group of people that know things about G.I. Joe. How do we do that? Well, we should do it at a comic convention. Well, we'd have to put together a whole crew and write a whole bunch of other sketches all about comic books. Okay, why don't we do that? Okay, when I sober up in the morning, I'll make some phone calls and figure it out. Okay. So then the next day I woke up and I said, well, I made a promise to this new friend of mine, Joe Goltz, who's guest of the show, long time.
Joe and Joe.
We told the story on the Joe Goltz episode, but that was when going back to what we talked about earlier with Superman and integrity. I woke up that morning. I'm not saying I referenced Superman in my brain, but I woke up that morning saying, man, I promised this guy who I recently, we were new friends. I promised him that I would follow up on this, and maybe it wouldn't have fallen. Maybe they would have said, no, go scratch. I don't know, whatever. Then who knows what the story would have been. But I had a contact at the production, Reed exhibitions, because I worked for Reed Elsevier, so I knew all the people. So I was like, I can get in touch with those people, drop of a hat. So, and that's what the promise I made to this new friend of mine, Joe Goltz. So I got to do it, and so I did, and they were like, absolutely, okay, you're in. And so then I literally in the first email, they were like, we'd love it, because they were just putting together C2E2. It was the first year of it, so they were starved for content.
I did not know that was the first year of it.
First year for C2E2, starved for content. So they were like 100% yes, absolutely. So I was like, okay. And then I called Joe. I go, guess what? We have 4 months to put together, write a whole show we've never done, put together actors and which we had never done, direct it, which we had never done, produced it, which we have never done. And then fast forward to 4 months later, and it all came together, and I think was fairly successful. And we went on to do 4 reviews, three or 4 shows, and at least 2 years at C2E2. And I think we did, I forget. I think 3 shows
Your
total.
sketch group was called Midgrade.
Midgrade Comics, yeah. And the final series of shows that we did at Second City 5 nights in August. Hot August nights.
Directed by
Miss Rebekah Walendzak.
Now Slepski,
then Walendzak. And to sold out crowds. Like the lowest night, actually it's funny, the smallest the theater was in crowd size was the weekend of Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Chicago Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Because I thought it would be great programming because it was so many people focused. But what I quickly realized was, they're focused on Comic-Con. They're not coming into the city.
You got to do it at Comic-Con. They're not going to come to the city. Yeah.
So it's so funny. That was the worst attended Saturday night. And even then it was still
What a
about
great
3.
lesson,
it was still
though.
about 3. Right. Oh, totally. It was still about 3/4 filled. We made money. I was able to pay the crew. And who gets paid for doing sketch in Chicago?
Nobody.
I
mean, there's the Second City. That's it.
We cut checks. So we put on my producer's hat. We were so proud to cut checks and be like, here you go, guys. It's not a ton of money, but here, this is we not only broke even, we paid for everything. And it was 8 of us, so that tells you that we did well. Like it was great. It was great. And then we moved to LA, and that all stopped. So it brings us all back to today, which is G.I. Joe has been the shoelace that has tied my shoe together, and I mean that. I really do mean that. And I don't know. It's weird because I didn't keep collecting the toys. I haven't gone back and gotten a ton of toys, although shout out to my boy Mike Moraski, hooked me up with a sweet box of vintage stuff. I still collected the comic. I said last week, told the story about me dropping the comic, and then 3 issues later, they actually canceled it in the mid-90s, and I was devastated because I thought it was my subscription that caused it to cancel. I was not a rabid Joe fan, but I was always had my finger on it. When the movie came out, I was on it. Loved it. But I wasn't participating in the boards and the whatevers. I was just doing other stuff. And then it was time to make a podcast. And I was like, what do I want to reconnect with? And I looked on my DVD shelf, and there was my G.I. Joe footlocker of my DVDs. And I was like, that's the show. And I Googled it a little bit. I was like, I think there's space for me in this podcasting world. I told this to my friend Stephen Paul from the G.I. Joeberg, wonderful G.I. Joeberg podcast. They're guys out of South Africa. I found their podcast, but it was like, it said it says from South Africa. I was like, what is this, a joke? Like who's podcasting about G.I. Joe from South Africa? And I was like, I'm in.
If they could do it, I could do it.
Turns out they're awesome.
Yeah.
And they're great. And they do they're huge. But my initial reaction.
You just have to be a fan.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that was it. So, and
Have that passion.
what's really awesome is I absolutely, I don't mean this in a take credit kind of way, but I am seeing now a lot of J. Joe podcasts pop up, and I love it because I think that means we were on the ground floor. We
Nice.
helped keep it alive.
There's room.
We're very much in the same space that Star Trek was in the early 70s,
Wow.
when there was nothing on TV. It wasn't being very supported very well by the company for a variety of reasons, good, bad, or ugly, but it just wasn't a thing. And
the fans.
so the fandom are keeping it alive. It's on fumes a little bit, and I do think that it is a little on fumes. I think G.I. Joe needs a little bit of TLC. I think it needs something. You know, that's the whole episode for a different one. But I love doing the show. I think this is a good place to be. You know, to just keep people positive about something that is cool and just is a through line. You know, doesn't mean more than it means. It's just a through line, and it's something that keeps your passions going. And some people get way into it, and some people just love it from a distance, and some people don't care about it at all. No offense, like you. I mean, you're not a fan of the product,
I don't care.
right? And we've had other guests too that have been on the show, but they've enjoyed being on the show.
Yeah.
They've enjoyed doing the podcast. You know, it sounds like this. I feel like as we're talking now, this should be the final episode, but it's not going to be. This is our special Christmas episode.
Special Christmas episode.
Ding, ding, ding,
That
ding,
being
ding,
said,
ding,
so
ding.
I had an idea.
But real quick though, so you know, but we talked about in my previous episode of Joe and Joe the plans for the show, and this is where we're at. You know, we got about 5 episodes left of the actual cartoons. You know, we've got stuff like Messenger from the Deep, the Ballad or Legend of Metalhead. You know, like stuff like that. Yeah, there's about 5 left, and we're gonna roll through those. And we're going to keep the Patreon going. And the Patreon is going to continue every week, if not a little more frequent, because I'll have a little more time. And I'll keep the Patreon's going to help keep the Joe on Joe podcast feed alive, because you know it costs money to host it. You know, so
And that's the thing that a lot of people don't think about podcasts, right?
Yeah.
They are free for you to listen. They're not free to be produced, right?
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
learned it's a really
You
it's
think a little bit of-
anytime you listen to someone's podcast, and it's got to be paid for to have a place to live, right? It's got to be paid for to have a place to live.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's out of people's passion going, I love this so much. Whatever it is I have to say, that I'm going to pay for you to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
That's-
It is Yeah, it's crucial. Like it's and I've been lucky enough, man. I've gotten some great patrons to come over, and they want to hear more Joe and Joe Illustrated, but they want to just help support the show, and then that helps everyone else, because we're going to keep the feed alive so that everyone can access it. I am going to flip the Patreon a little bit, so that our first 30 episodes are no longer going to be behind the paywall. I'm going to make them free again on the main feed, because we've gotten the Patreon enough to where I think I know where the
Great.
best place for those to live is.
Good.
So we're going to make those available again on the main feed, but I'm going to put a little bumper on it to catch them up, because now at this point those recordings are 3 years old.
Yeah.
You know, so
Especially your beginning ones. You didn't even have guests in the beginning.
Yeah. I actually have ideas on that too. I might go back in the next year and redo those with guests.
Great.
And do like special format stuff.
All just me though, right?
Yeah,
Just me the
all
whole time.
you. And go back, and we're gonna put those live, but then we're gonna release new Joe and Joe Illustrateds every 5, just like we do. But it's gonna live on the Patreon, and if you want to get a weekly hit of me, you know, that's where you'll be able to find me.
They just can't quit you, Joe.
Right. And then I'm just gonna take all that creative energy we've been talking about this whole hour and focus it, and I think we're going to see some cool things, like maybe an episode of Joe and Joe Theater gets produced that I've been wanting to do, which is going to take a lot of energy and
Nice.
time, but I think that's going to happen. I've also got some ideas for a...
Oh, you're hearing it first, people. Breaking news, breaking news.
you guys listen to podcasts like Serial?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
That's all I'm going to say. I got ideas. That's
Is it about breakfast cereal?
Yes. That is the thing though, and this is the biggest lesson. I think this is a good out for us on the show. We're not doing an episode of the cartoon today. I think this is just a great special holiday special.
Because we've learned about all the different people who love G.I. Joe through your wonderful, wonderful interview skills. And I personally thought that people would like to get to know you a little better. You're not a guy to toot your own horn, but somebody needs to toot it.
Thank
and from the lady who toots your horn.
Burp, burp.
Wait, what? Continue.
If there's one thing we've learned from this hour of conversation is make the time for the things that are important. You know, and that's such a, you know, cliche of like, oh, spend time with your family and you know,
Life is too short.
Life is short, and obviously all that stuff. Yeah, but I mean this in a really real way. You only have so much energy and so much creative energy and so much daily energy and all that stuff. When you say I'm too busy to, that's not a phrase that I appreciate. I like to use the phrase I have not made time to. You know, so it's like when we were talking earlier about artistic stuff. I did not make time to learn the craft better, you know, to study it better in high school. You know, I chose to use the time that I did on other things. It wasn't that I was too busy. It was I didn't prioritize it. So it's one of the things I'm doing now is I'm prioritizing my next year of
especially as we
podcasting.
get to the new year, right?
Yeah,
Use this
yeah.
as an opportunity,
Yep,
listeners.
yep,
What
yeah.
are you doing
and
for the
end
new
of
year?
and the end of the DIC stuff is a great it's a great place to put a pin on it. We may come back and we may do stuff like G.I. Joe Renegades and Resolute and stuff like that, and G.I. Joe Extreme. I do have the DVDs for G.I. Joe Extreme. It's so bad. It's terrible. But you know, so there may be some special stuff there, but I can't do that stuff and still maintain the, you know, weekly regular grind of doing this, because this has been my favorite creative outlet that I've been doing in the last few years, but that's been the choice. So I'm choosing to do something different. So I'm very excited for what 2019 brings.
I'm excited, and I have two requests. One, I would love it at the start of G.I. Joe Theater if you were to go into your files and find that G.I. Joe scene from Mid-Grade Comics.
What a good idea.
And maybe you and I, and maybe some friends, or just you and I, come up with our voices like
God.
Kevin Matthews.
Oh my God.
And we use our voice talents, and we bring that to life for listeners on Patreon. I see what I did there, baby. And then, so I think that is a great start, because I was there when it happened, and I would love to just see that come to life, because I'm proud of you, and I love you, and I support you, and I love to see you at the core of that.
We'll finally know for sure, was it funny or not?
Well, right? But that being said, so one of the notes that I would give you when we were bringing that in front of an audience was, there are going to be people who are going to love this and are going to die over it. But then there's people like me who are like, I don't get it, right? You can put it in its purest form before I put my stank on it. And you can give it to the people who appreciate it most, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And then two, as you have in all of your episodes, you ask your guests to come up with a name of what they would be as a G.I. Joe character. Now, it's different. You have a name, which is
Old
styled,
and Deep Dish,
formerly known as Deep
V2,
Dish,
V1,
who now is Thin Crust. And my character is Toilet Teal,
Cobra cleaning lady.
the Cobra Polish cleaning lady. Now, that being said, to give you a little background, so Deep Dish and Old Style have to do with him being from the south side of Chicago upbringing. I bring Toilet Teal as the Polish cleaning lady because in Chicago, there just happens to be a large proliferation of Polish cleaning ladies. And my last name is Walendzak Slepski, so I'm as Polish as they come.
Not hiding it.
So we don't need to come up with the names, but I thought, and especially since he brought up G.I. Joe Theater, what would happen if Deep Dish, what's Deep Dish's voice? Bears. Talk to me as Deep Dish. Introduce yourself as Deep Dish.
Hey everybody, I'm Deep Dish. I'm here to, carry the big machine guns. I've got a pizza as a shield.
Good.
So I'll block some incoming lasers and or ballistic incoming weaponry, and talk bears.
Great. And as Toilet Teal, the Polish cleaning lady, but she's traveled and knows a lot of languages, so we'll say that her accent is somewhat all over the place, a.k.a. maybe I don't have a Polish accent. What would happen if they met up and were star-crossed lovers from two separate sides?
It would be like Mainframe and Zorana.
So that being said, I would like to set the scene. Deep Dish has infiltrated the Cobra offices in the evening while Toilet Teal empties trash cans.
Boy.
Lights up.
It's a good thing no Cobra saw me sneak into this Cobra, this extensive enterprise's business. I better jump on that computer and find out some incriminating evidence ASAP.
Tip, tap, tap, tip, tap, tap. Mouse click. Hello, sir. would you like your trash can clean this evening?
We're all good here. I'm just no, I don't need any trash. I'm going to finish up with Tomax's computer in just about 2 seconds. I'll be out of your hair. By the way, it's a lovely hairnet you're wearing.
Why?
A lovely hairnet you're wearing.
Why, thank you. You're so much nicer than normal people here at the Cobra and the headquarters.
Yeah, thank you. We're part of a new initiative from HR, from Cobra HR. Yeah, they said it's kind of a be nice and friendly, be courteous. It's called Cobra Courteous.
Oh my, I like that. That makes me think of Homeland, Old Country. There's something about you. You have a certain air of...
Well, it's funny you mentioned Homeland. You might possibly be Polish.
Yeah?
Also Polish.
Oh, my.
Cobra's got great recruitment in Poland.
Oh, good. It, we are a very hard-working bunch. Honestly, I'm relatively new to country, and I just need a job. I come to Cobra Command Center headquarters. I just need a job while I was the physician in Poland.
Oh, you really?
I was.
You were. Yeah, and see what's so funny over here? They elevate someone like Mindbender, who was just a dentist, to being Dr. Mindbender.
Oh, that
and
showed, right?
Right?
That
yeah,
showed.
Right. But
what an idiot! You should see how dirty his office is.
Oh, I can't even imagine. And you're a doctor in Poland.
I am.
And here you are. You're the cleaning lady.
Not only doctor, like chemist, like Madame Curie.
I think it's time Cobra gets themselves a Me Too movement, my friend.
Honestly, there's something.
They got Baroness up top, but she tends to keep you women on under her boot, if you know what I'm saying.
She hates other women.
Yeah,
she really does. It's like she's beautiful, and I want to say your hair is beautiful. What do you use on that? But she won't even make eye contact with me. She hates other women.
She might be jealous of your accent, because she might be like, I am. Pardon me, I'm going to do a poor version of your accent.
Please do.
I'm the only person that can have that kind of accent.
I think it's fake. Honestly, I don't even know where she's from.
Really?
Such an authentic Polish accent here. I don't know what she is.
Interesting. And she's always pulling those masks off, right? It's like she doesn't know who she is. She's always volunteering to go undercover. Like, maybe be happy in your own skin. You know what I mean?
And was that what she really wants to be? Was she forced into this? She should work for Fangoria magazine. Seriously, work in the horror movies. That's women can be anything these days. You don't have to be evil. You can work on movies that are about the evil. You know what I'm saying?
Hashtag Cobra 2.
Hashtag
Cobra 2. TOO.
200. That's
Cobra
true.
2. We got to get Cobra in on the Me Too movement. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap this up and just skedaddle, right? You never saw me?
Who are you?
Okay. But here, I'll tell you what, though. Here's my card. You ignore the G.I. Joe stuff on it.
Yeah.
But give me a call.
Yeah.
Give me a call if you decide you want to, look for a new gig. We have a whole
in your life.
Maybe, but we got a transportable air sea battle platform that has toilets. We've got a battle base, sectional battle base. Not only do we have a toilet, it's got a prison with a toilet. It's got a car lift. It's got a Gatling gun. It's got a removable flag. It's got storage compartments. It's got a whole lot of stuff. All could be cleaned.
Is there health care included?
Government. Obamacare. Is that okay?
Well, I say ACA is good for you and me.
It works for me, my friend.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it works for me. We don't have the kind of retirement packages that Cobra does, though. Cobra's they've got Cobra World magazine. They've got Cobra retirement policies. They've got Cobra retirement vacation like resorts.
Timeshares
doesn't have that.
Timeshares. Cobra pays your timeshare. That's ridiculous.
I know. It's Cobra's
enticing.
pretty well funded.
It's enticing.
Pretty well funded, but so if you ever want, just give me a call.
I will.
I will.
You had a good evening, and whatever your name was, I never saw you here.
You call me old style.
Okay, old style. I've got toilets to plunge. Goodbye.
And scene.
And that
is Joe and Joe Theater.
Joe and Joe improvised theater. And seriously, the accent was brilliant from Toilet Teal. I think that's
really what brought it to the forefront.
Well, Joe Slepski.
Rebekah Walendzak.
I am a huge fan of you as a human, you as an artist, And honestly, I know we've said that, does my appreciation lie in all things G.I. Joe? No. But I sure do appreciate your passion and your drive. And I've learned about commitment to something that really matters in integrity from watching you have this idea and with no poking or prodding from anyone else, you deciding you were going to do this. And just seeing, from a Craigslist ad, you going and as a grown-ass man being putting the sweat equity in to help someone else with their podcast and to learn about podcasting from working on other people's podcasts out here in LA to you making this a reality. Hats off to you. Go, Joe.
Well, now you Joe. And Joeing is half the battle.